Hey everybody, this is Griffin, and you might be wondering where I am on Friday. I'm actually filling out the last parts of the requirements to get my teaching license, so I'm not going to be there. But I did make a video that is going to prepare you for what we do on Monday and Tuesday when Klaber's not going to be there. Well, we're going to be making abstract art, and we're going to be doing it using our photos. It'll be pretty cool. You'll get results that you really don't expect, and it's not hard to do either. This is one of the easiest and most fun things for me to do, and I'm hoping I can show all of you what I'm talking about here. But so, in introducing abstract art, I want to show some examples and give you an idea of what this stuff looks like. Now, I talked in one other video, the very first video I did, I think, where I was like, art is usually people, places, and things. It's figures, landscapes, and still life. And those are all from real life. They're all something that you can see and you can tell what it is. Abstract art can't always tell what it is. It might just be shapes and colors, right? And so that stands totally outside of the normal kinds of art. And so what counts as abstract art? These shapes and colors on the left certainly do, but so do these weird colors of a person, Marilyn Monroe, on the right. This on the left is Hans Hofmann. This on the right is Andy Warhol, the famous pop artist. We did a pop art project in this class. But both of these are abstract, even though you can tell that that is a person. The unrealistic colors make it abstract. Anything that's not realistic starts being abstract. And there's different levels of what's abstract, from just changing the colors or changing the shapes to changing just about everything until you can't even tell if it's something real anymore. Now, for the longest time, abstract art was not even seen as an option. Let me go back to like 1500 with the Mona Lisa. Or 1665, you've got the woman with the pearl earring. And these paintings, they're famous. They look like real people. I go a little further, 1717. This is a real landscape. Looks just like it could be plucked from real life. And there's people in it. People look pretty real. Late 1700s. Looks pretty real. 1818 looks pretty real to me. And for all of these different art movements that swept through Europe over hundreds of years, here's a nice little dog, they all try to mimic real life. The style changes a bit, but they're not just throwing down colors and shapes and going, I'll do what I want. They really are trying to create a real life scene. And so all these different art movements throughout hundreds of years, all realistic in some way, until you get to Impressionism in the late 1800s. And then artists are thinking, what if I change up the style to where it doesn't have to be realistic at all if I don't want? This is one of the first Impressionist paintings. It gave the genre Impressionism its name. When Claude Monet was asked about this painting, he said, "It's my impression of a sunrise." The shadows are blue, right? Rather than being gray, black, or brown, they have more feeling to them. These big brush strokes on the water, they're not super detailed. They're really big brush strokes. But it doesn't matter. It gives you the feeling of water. The people on the boat, you can't really tell, oh, are there 3 or 4 people on that boat on the left? Does it matter? You can feel that there's people on a boat, right? And this is just the tip of the iceberg for abstract art. This is Georges Seurat. He's a pointillist painter, meaning he makes his art out of a bunch of tiny little dots. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tiny little dots. And you can see how There's no faces in these paintings. Look at the clothing, and there's no wrinkles in the clothing. It's just shapes. And yet, Impressionists were really about what does light and shadow look like? This yellows and greens. What does it feel like when you see people in a garden on the river? Um, this stuff is not about being realistic anymore. It's about capturing a feeling and doing a certain style. Vincent van Gogh, the most famous Impressionist, he has these huge, thick brush strokes, and here he is with one version of the Starry Night and with a portrait of his doctor. Landscape, portrait, that's it. They're both not really colors you would see in real life. If you look up at the night sky, usually it's black with the stars being white. Here, sky's blue, stars are yellow. This guy's skin is very yellow. And there's so much texture on everything, on his coat, on the wall behind him. And just because Van Gogh wants to, and he thinks it'll look interesting, he's just playing around with lines and colors. He's breaking down art into its most simple pieces and playing with those pieces. So here's an artist, Paul Signac, who really shows what this feels like. This guy has got all these crazy patterns behind him as he pulls a flower from a hat. He's like a magician. Could you ever see anything like this 50 years before? No! Like, this is what abstract art did to the art world, is it kicked the door wide open for anything to be possible. And Paul Signac, here's a ocean scene that he does, all these boats, and there's castles and the sky, and the colors are insane. Like, they're not realistic at all, but they're so interesting. There's so much feeling in them. So, Paul Signac is an example of a Fauvist painter. Around 1900, Impressionism turned a corner into Fauvism and Cubism. I'm going to show Fauvism first, and it's about unrealistic colors, like you see here. Andre Duran, big Fauvist. There's orange sun on the hills, blue shadows. The trees, I love the shapes. And yet it really is about color is the main thing with Fauvism. Messing around with unrealistic color. Here's Jean Metzinger, and these flamingos have huge brush strokes around them, but it doesn't really matter because it captures the feeling of these windy necks that the flamingos have. And the colors are so vibrant. So Henri Matisse is the most famous of these Fauvist painters. And if we continue from here, Fauvism went beyond realism with its colors. Cubism went beyond realism with its shapes. Here's what that looks like. Juan Gris on the left is painting a guy in a suit with a pipe, and on the right is painting some buildings. But when we start messing with the shapes, you'll see that it becomes harder to tell what we're looking at than when you mess with the colors. Robert Delaunay, here on the left he's painting the Eiffel Tower, but on the right, I can't even really tell that those were supposed to be buildings. It just looks like a bunch of angles and shapes and lines, right? So Cubism, although it happens at the same time as Fauvism, it allows for just shapes and colors, which barely look like anything realistic at all. Pablo Picasso, the most famous cubist, here he is doing so 3 musicians on the left and a woman on the right. And well, Fauvism and Cubism, right, the colors, the shapes, one feels a little more pushing it than the other. And I think Cubism pushes it more with the shapes, just because it's harder to tell what you're looking at, right? And so there comes a point when you realize both of these still, I can tell what I'm looking at. We haven't reached the point where it's just shapes and colors. And when does that happen? Well, of course, it happens as a spinoff of Cubism in Russia. Kazimir Malevich, here he's doing a painting of a person. It's called The Knife Striker. And man, I can barely tell there's supposed to be a person in this painting. At some point, he just gives up on trying to show anything realistic and just goes for it. Shapes and colors. Here it is. We've reached full abstract. Now, there's another painter from Russia, Vasily Kandinsky, and he tries to show what it looks like to hear music. He wants to put the feeling of listening to music into a visual, and that looks really cool. Later, he does a lot of shapes and colors, geometric paintings like this. And they have a lot of energy to them. I like Kandinsky. But again, don't know what I'm looking at. So we kind of run into a problem when both of these are abstract. That even though, one, I can tell it's a woman, two, I can't tell what that is. Is there any way we can separate these out with some more words? Because abstract is not cutting it. Both of these are abstract, but like one's realistic and one's not. So here's what I use to describe abstract paintings that look realistic. Abstraction. Abstraction is the process of transforming something realistic into something that isn't realistic. Whereas non-objective art or non-representational art doesn't represent anything from the real world. So that really is our distinction. Here, this on the left, it's kind of abstract colors. The grass is yellow. The sky is made up of stripes, right? But through abstraction, we reach a point that is totally non-objective, and that is just shapes and colors, right? It depends how much abstraction we do to get to non-objective. So this is abstraction, but that's looking non-objective. I don't know what that is. Salvador Dali, right? If you have to ask which one this is, well, I can tell there's melting clocks. I can tell there's some water in the back or mountains. So I say that's abstraction. Whereas Hans Hofmann, I can't tell what that is. It looks like just shapes and colors that he's messing with. That would be non-objective art. So that distinction seems helpful. And what we make on Monday and Tuesday can be either of those. You're going to use photos to make these, which start out as realistic. But then, the more you mess with those photos, the more abstract it'll get. And either you get abstraction, where you can still tell what your original picture was, or you get something non-objective, where you can't tell what your original picture was, right? So, more examples of this. Here's Gino Severini. He's a cubist, and this is abstraction, right? I can still tell there's a train. I can still tell on the right that there's kind of some people playing instruments. There's a flute in there. There's a violin in there. Although it's getting more non-objective. This is kind of a sliding scale here. It's not always one or the other. Jackson Pollock, oh, I don't know what that is, right? That's not objective. And just to show a few more artists, to show this difference, Andy Warhol, right? He's taking a cat and making it green. He's taking Marilyn Monroe and making her green and pink and purple. That's abstraction. Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of the coolest painters from the 80s, and he's doing both. Non-objective on the left, can't tell what that is, but abstraction on the right. Oh yeah, it's a dinosaur. Now, Keith Haring, a wonderful dude who just painted stick figures and became famous for that. Now, stick figures are an abstraction of a person. This is abstraction. But here's my last two, and they're non-objective, right? Cy Twombly just does huge scribbles. Can't tell what it is. Big scribble. Non-objective. And Jade Fadojutimi kind of elevates that with more colors. Can't tell what it is. Non-objective. So on Monday, we're going to make our abstract and non-objective art from our photos. Remember that the more you mess with the photo, the more abstracted it gets, and either it's going to be a lower level of abstraction or all the way up to non-objective, depending on the decisions you make with editing. We're just going to try different stuff, and we're going to get some cool results. Now, thank you for tuning in. I will see you on Monday.